This is the first album of photographs that I ever produced, and we are here in the National Library, which has a major holding of my work. I think it's an obsession. It must be, mustn't it?
And he, as a young man, wanted to photograph them to make sure that at least their images would make sure that they were present to posterity.
None of us are here forever, and if we don't record what these people look like, how do they live? How do they, not necessarily how do they paint? What does their kitchen look like? What does their mantelpiece look like? What does their front door look like? Front doors tell you a lot. It could be a council house, it could be a castle. It's interesting. Well, it all began at junior school in Cymru, Cairo, just down the road here from Craigkevin Park, where we live today. As a project at school, we had a teacher who decided that we should build pinhole cameras out of a cardboard box. Those used to come in a little box, and that was the lens. And you took the lid off and long exposures, and then we developed the paper negatives in a little dark room at school.
As soon as I met him, I knew him to be a very unusual man, because it struck me that he was a man of vision. He's a man with a mean, uncanny eye for the eloquently telltale detail that he can actually cram into a photograph.
With the film and the camera that I borrowed, I proceeded lunchtime out into photograph the docks and the fishing boats unloading. I'd taken 30 shots, and I had 6 left on the roll of film when the most enormous explosion happened. And it was then that, running over to see what it was, I realised that Swansea Gasworks had blown up. Well, one gasometer had blown up, one was smouldering, and the other was probably the next one to go. And here are the 3 shots, 2 shots of each that I took. These were the first ones taken when I first arrived there, and I could see the gasworks. This one here smouldering, or it's not smouldering, on fire, and this one from the main gate looking back towards the explosion. And here I'm going through the gate, and the fireman's running towards me saying, "Get out, get out. The whole place is going up." And I said, "Don't worry, I'm from the Daily Express." So I don't know how they thought the Daily Express would get there. And then when I went to college at Reading, I acquired my Rolly. And here it is, my Rolleiflex. This camera is bigger than 35mm. It's 2¼ inches square with the most marvellous optics. And the idea of this was to do portraiture. I asked, why pieces of a jigsaw? I explained. There's 120 people in this book. How many people have I photographed? I've never actually counted them. But I do believe the Welsh Arts Archive, as I call it, must be up in the thousands now.
Well, back in the 1930s, Swansea astonishingly produced a remarkable crop of talent. These were writers and artists and musicians. The most famous of them, of course, was Dylan Thomas. But in addition, there were others who were close friends of his, and they used to meet at a cafe here in Swansea called the Cardoma Cafe, and eventually they became known as the Cardoma Gang, or the Swansea Gang.
Vernon Watkins, a lovely man, on the cliffs at Pennard, which is on the Gower, near Swansea, where the poet Vernon Watkins lived. But not only a poet, he was a bank teller. He worked in the bank in Swansea and travelled there by bus every day for all his working life. So while he wrote poetry, he travelled to the bank. He was a very quiet man with white hair that blew in the wind when you can see the hair moving in the photograph that I took here outside. Seeing the cliffs, I thought, right, the first place, not having a lot of money, with 12 exposures on a roll of film, we came here. And I think the whole shot was done here on the 12 rolls. Probably half the film taken here, and then the rest of the film taken inside the wooden house with just the one lamp hanging there. I tended to go for the arts pages that were more, I thought, more interesting. And therefore I did meet a lot of famous people. Graham Hill became quite a friend, really. We'd look at the crowd of photographers from the newspapers, and he'd spot me in the crowd, and he'd say, "Bernard, come here, what do you want?" And I'd say, "Oh, so just for something." He said, "Come with me, and we'll do some photograph for the paper." And he was so lovely. And I think it all came about because he had a crash. I think he was in America, but I'm not sure. And they said he'd never race again. And he was in Northwood Hospital, recovering from this terrible crash. And it was in a great gymnasium, completely empty, with an exercise bike in the middle of the room. And there was Graham, fighting back, fighting for fitness. And this image of the loneliness almost of the whole thing was used half a page in the newspaper. Yes. Eric Morecambe lived in Harpenden, and he too was a man I photographed a lot. And he was a lovely, lovely man. He was just the same on screen, I think, as he was in real life. Two more people. One was Daniel Jones. Here I am again in the Newton Inn. The last time I was a student, aged about 18, and I'd come to see Daniel Jones, Dr. Daniel Jones, the great composer. Rather nervous student, went to the house just down the road here. We went upstairs to his grand piano, took some photographs in the house. At 12 o'clock came, boing, the clock went, and Daniel says, "Do you fancy a pint? The pubs are open." So we came up here to the Newton Inn, and we stayed here drinking pint after pint after pint. And of course, the better the photographs got, the more we drank. At 3 o'clock, Mrs. Jones comes in and says to Daniel, "I'm taking you home," by a scruff of the neck, "and rocking you in your room till you compose some music." R.S. Thomas, probably like Dylan, the Thomas twins perhaps, the famous poet, and a bit apprehensive because he had a very serious reputation of being the most miserable man in Wales. "Oh, I couldn't possibly ask R.S. Thomas," says the editor. "I'll give you his phone number." So I rang R.S. Thomas. So R.S. said, "Oh, very busy this week, very busy this week. Ring me Friday." And I thought, hang on, that's not a no. We sat there inside with his lovely long white hair and those beady eyes looking at me. And he liked rugby. And I wondered, because I'd looked around and noticed that in fact there was no television in this house. So I said, how do you manage to watch the internationals, R.S.? "Oh," he said, "I borrow them, one from next door," he said. I thought that was rather funny. So he wasn't such an ogre, was he? I'm not going to go into the politics of it, but by God, we've got to be very careful that we don't lose what we've got. Young people coming up, young artists, young writers, the best.